Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sister. It's news that's nightly about the Redskins. Welcome to the Redskins Nightly News. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, the Redskins pulled off an improbable road victory on Sunday versus the Carolina Panthers, 29-21. Their second straight win in as many weeks, and their third win overall on the season as they now run their record to 3-9. I'm not going to sit here and act as if I thought this was going to take place. I'm not going to sit here and act as if I wasn't surprised. I was all of the above. I could not believe what I was watching on the television screen yesterday as the Redskins racked up 244 rushing yards, had damn near 200-yard rushers. I think I misspoke yesterday when I said we had 200-yard rushers. Might as well say we did, but Adrian Peterson was just a yard short of a 100-yard performance. 13 carries, 99 yards for him. 10 carries, 129 yards for Darius Guice. It was a very impressive 1-2 punch, two-headed monster backfield that the Redskins sprung onto the Carolina Panthers. Don't discount what the offensive line, and as I mentioned yesterday, the tight ends and the receivers in their role, and don't forget about Michael Burton as well at fullback, in their role in the Redskins having over 240 rush yards in the game on Sunday versus Carolina. So it was a collective effort. Anytime you have those kinds of runs of 60 and 22 and 30, when you have big runs like that, other guys on the outside, the receivers, the tight ends, the fullback, other guys have to chip in and have big blocks on those types of plays as well. And then you need special backs to make those kinds of runs happen. And that's what you saw yesterday with Guice and the stiff arm, which was just vicious, flavor delicious, poetic scripture at its best. And then Adrian Peterson doing what he does, which is just shrug off tacklers, make guys miss, and get into the end zone. Guice with 2 touchdowns yesterday. Peterson with an additional touchdown as the Redskins put up 29 points. Didn't see that coming. All right, Redskins, as I mentioned on the preview for this game, Redskins hadn't scored over 17 points, but 3 times this season. The first 2 weeks of the season, and then in week 12 versus Detroit, they needed a field goal late in the fourth quarter to get to 19 points, to get over 17 for the first time since week 2. I didn't anticipate them getting to 29 as they did in this game, or scoring 29 unanswered points, especially with the way the game started. We talked about much of this yesterday, so I don't want to rehash that. I just want to get a little bit more into the finer granular details of yesterday's win by the Redskins and kind of give you a lot of the things that I saw after going back and watching again and reassessing the Redskins victory, and then some takeaways from the ball game. And so let's go down the list. Let's start with Dwayne Haskins. I actually thought after going back and watching, and I felt this way in the moment, and I think I'm doubling down on it now after going back and watching, that was actually a pretty solid performance. And Dwayne talked about this. There were times where he left the pocket, kind of jettisoned the pocket a little bit earlier than he needed to. But I think it was because of some of the early pressure. I mean, literally, he gets sacked on the first possession. I talked about this yesterday on the R3. But Adrian Peterson literally whiffs. And we asked over the course of his career, why wasn't Adrian Peterson ever a third down back? And this goes back into his time in Minnesota when he was the man. They always had a guy that they wanted on the field on third downs, whether it was Mewelde Moore or whomever. They always had another guy come in on third downs. Why? Because Adrian Peterson isn't a great blocker. You saw it on that play. For as physical a runner as he can be, with the ball in his hands, that was as soft a pass pro as you will see. And I was really disappointed in him on that one. And it was plays like that early in the ball game that I thought had Dwayne thinking that I need to speed up my internal clock because I don't have a ton of time. The pass blocking in this game was not very good. All right. At times, he had a great pocket and he had time to throw, but there were so many other times where he either had to vacate the pocket quickly or the pressure was on him and he didn't stand a chance. And so 5 sacks of Dwayne Haskins in this game. So I didn't really blame him for being a little antsy and wanting to get out of the pocket anytime he saw a different color jersey flash in front of his face. But that being said, I thought he did some really good things in the pocket, outside of the pocket. There are a couple of throws. I thought he was so good on the 2-minute drill right before half. He made some really accurate and decisive and some super duper rapid fast, throws where you're talking serious arm strength with accuracy. And that's something that we talked about last week that he didn't have enough of. And if you just look at the numbers, 13 of 25, not going to wow you, barely over 50% completion percentage. You're going to think he wasn't accurate yet again, but there are a number of drops. McLaurin had 2 drops in this game. Sprinkle had 2 drops in this game. Harmon had a ball that I thought he could have caught or at least had a better attempt at. I don't know where he had that one-handed grab last week, and all of a sudden now he thinks he can one-hand grab every damn thing. But to Haskins' credit, he kept chipping away, kept making plays, using his legs to escape. That play to Sprinkle, even though he dropped it. And you know what I find very odd and interesting with Jeremy Sprinkle me, bitch, sprinkle me, is that with Jeremy, it's the easy catches that he seems to drop and fumble and molest, and then it's the ones where you're like, man, that's a tough ass grab that he somehow comes down with. You know what I mean? The 2-point conversion, he didn't catch that one, but he almost caught it. He almost caught that. I'd like to see him reel that one in, but that was a toughie. But then the one out in the flats, you're like, dude, seriously? Like, come on, man, catch that. That's a first down. First of all, why are you sliding to the ground? You didn't need to do that. So anyway, I digress. Haskins had at least 5 drops in this game. And those drops make a huge difference in the way we view his numbers and maybe even some of the outlook on the performance. For me, the numbers don't skew my thought in terms of how he played in this game. I thought it was a really good job of managing the game. He was under duress. He did not turn it over despite getting hit and fumbling the football that one time. I thought he took care of the football. I don't recall any plays in which he was on the verge of making a mistake, turning it over, made a poor read, almost got picked off or anything of the sort. I thought he did a good job of managing the game, taking what the defense was giving him. I love the throw over the middle to Sprinkle with a defender over the middle of the field. I want to say it was Luke Kuechly jumping in the air and having to put the football over him to a wide open Sprinkle. That's touch. Remember I talked about I needed to see touch from Haskins? That was a little bit of touch on that throw. How about the play where he's getting pressured, he's backing up to buy time, and then throws a nice little loft job to Jeremy Sprinkle, who is a wide ass open over the middle of the football field and gets a first down on a 3rd down. That's touch, okay? So I asked for these things, and now I'm starting to see them. I asked for accuracy. We got accuracy. I asked for touch. I got touch. So I thought Haskins, all in all, despite the pressure that was on him and some opportunities that he may have missed, some things that he may not have seen because he vacated the pocket a little too soon, I thought, and obviously the biggest criticism I had was the missed opportunity in the red zone. The Redskins' red zone offense has to be better. When we're not at the 1-yard line running it in for a touchdown or getting an Adrian Peterson 12-yard touchdown run, we're not getting in the end zone. We have to find ways to get in the end zone via the passing game. Dwayne Haskins only has 2 passing touchdowns on the season, and they both came in garbage time versus the Jets. I'd like to see him be able to finish a drive that he starts by getting it in the end zone via his arm. And he had an opportunity to do that with Steven Sims wide open on a whip route that he just totally turned down and neglected to see. And honestly, I don't know what he was looking at because I felt like his progression should have taken him there. He started all the way outside, and then the next guy in line was Steven Sims, who was wide open. He was staring at that side of the field. How he doesn't see Steven Sims on that play, it behooves me. But speaking of Steven Sims, that's the next guy I want to talk about because this was by far and away his best game as a receiver, most active game, most targets he has seen in any given game this season. And he responded very well with the opportunities that he was given. Like to see him get more involved. 3 catches in this game. Thought he did some really good things with the football in his hands. Also got a chance to return some punts after the injury to Trey Quinn. Thought he did a good job running up and fielding the punts. It was not an easy day to field punts as it was very windy. We saw the flags blowing on the field. So we know it was not an easy day to go and field punts. I thought he did a really good job of saving the Redskins some field position, especially one late in the ball game where he ran up, caught it, and then got an additional 4 or 5 yards. And, when you let the ball hit the ground on days like that, and it hits the nose, next thing you know, if you would have caught it, you'd have been at the 33-yard line. Instead, you're starting that possession off at the 13-yard line, and he ran up and got that football. So I thought Steven Sims did some really good things in the game, and he's a part of that young nucleus. When we start talking about building blocks for the future, he's a guy that has to be included in that mix. You're talking guys, you're talking Haskins, you're talking McLaurin, you're talking Harmon. You got to add Steven Sims into that mix. He's a part of that young nucleus of offensive weaponry that we really like, and we're hoping that a guy like Bryce Love next year is able to add his name to the list of young players that we think can really help contribute with this football team moving forward. But Sims is a guy you cannot forget about, and I thought he had a really solid day as a wide receiver and as a punt returner. The young nucleus, I just spoke of them, but it was good to see them not just on the offensive side, but on the defensive side as well. I mean, we got to start talking about, and I want to see more. I'm not going to just start singing the praises of Fab Moreau, but he was fantastic Fab again yesterday. Fantastic Fab. He was that again yesterday. All right. That's 2 games in a row where he's played outside in Josh Norman's role and has excelled. That's where he was at UCLA when he was coming into the league. He played well there. That's what got him drafted in the 3rd round. A lot of people felt like Fab Moreau was a first-round talent, but he had the injury at the combine to his pec, and so he fell to the 3rd round. Redskins felt like they got a steal. Maybe they did get a steal. Well, we're going to find out. But right now, I'm still in wait-and-see mode, but I like what I've seen. He's going to get a real test this week, and we'll see if he comes crashing back down to earth as we get AR-12 this week. He's a bad man. And Aaron Rodgers, he's not going to miss Christian McCaffrey out in the flats like Kyle Allen did, okay? If we blow coverage like we did a couple of times, should have given up a touchdown when on that 3rd down play where or 4th down, where Kyle Allen runs backwards 20 yards. They had a wide open receiver, Jarius Wright, in the end zone. Should have been a touchdown. Aaron Rodgers didn't miss that, all right? On that pick that Fat Moreau had, Christian McCaffrey is wide open on the outside. Okay, blown coverage by the Redskins. Both he and the safety on that particular play, Landon Collins, both go with the slant. All right, and Christian McCaffrey probably catches that football. There's one guy to beat in Monte Nicholson. He's going to slice and dice Monte's ass up, leave his ankles in shambles, probably somewhere around the 35-yard line, and that's going to be a 91-yard touchdown run, or catch, So we got away with some mishaps, and in other weeks, teams have taken advantage. Well, they had a young quarterback. He failed to take advantage, and so we did, and we thank him for that. And so don't think for one second that this defense is all of a sudden fixed. There were opportunities, all right, and we did give up 14 to start the game off, and there was a busted coverage with a wide open touchdown for DJ Moore. We still have defensive mishaps, but we made a lot more plays than we did boo-boos in this football game. And I talked about the young nucleus. What about that young defensive line? Everybody stepped up. I mean, there wasn't a single guy that I wasn't impressed with when I went back and watched. Tim Settle had himself a really good game. I talked about Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen yesterday. Both of those guys were ultra impactful, especially when you go back and watch those guys work yesterday. I thought they did some really good things up front, pressuring the quarterback, collapsing the pocket. You don't get 7 sacks off and 3 or 4 of them coming off the edge without interior pressure. Because if you don't have any interior pressure, if your guys in the middle aren't collapsing the pocket, that quarterback's just going to step up. He's still going to have time to deliver the football. And so we had pressure from everywhere. Kyle Allen felt the walls closing in on him. All right. Credit the Redskins for getting pressure on Kyle Allen and making him uncomfortable. And they started up front with the defensive line of Settle, Allen, Payne, Ioannidis, and then you get to the guys on the outside. I thought Sweat, before the injury, was playing by far and away. It's not even close, not up for debate. His best game as a Washington Redskin, 2 sacks in the game. And, you know, it was funny. I was on Twitter during the game, and I'm going to try to be a little bit more active on Twitter during these games. I know it's something I need to do. I'm usually in my shell when I'm watching a game. I don't want to be bothered, but I'm going to start trying to be a little bit more active because I want you guys to see what I see, hear what I hear. I want to see if we're on the same page. So I was on Twitter, and my man Hawk hit me up, and he was like, yo, Sweat's on the other side where Kerrigan usually plays, and he's killing it. Like, maybe we were playing him on the wrong side the entire time. And, it didn't dawn on me until Hawk said that I said to myself, you know what? When you go back and watch Montez Sweat, his best football was on that left side of the defense, right side of the offense. So it makes sense that he'd be more comfortable over there. You go back and you put in Montez Sweat, Mississippi State highlights, and you see that a lot of his pressures, a lot of his disruptiveness comes from the left side of the defense, right side of the offense. So it makes sense that, I saw a spin back inside on one of the sacks. I saw long arm of the law. I'm like, I haven't seen this all year from you. Where has this been? I saw pure, unadulterated speed off the edge where, Greg Olsen didn't stand a chance in hell. He got out of the blocks like a bat out of hell on that play where he just smoked Greg Olsen across. Greg-O had no shot. Just ran right by him like he was 35 years old, which he is. Smoked him like he was supposed to. And I'm saying to myself, maybe he's just comfortable on that side. And again, I've said and I've advocated all season long for moving this guy around. I said he's a Jadeveon Clowney type where you don't just put him in one place and say, all right, go get him, young fella. You move him around. You don't let the defense or offense know where this guy's going to be. And so they can't account for him here or there or know exactly where he's going to be. Move him around. Get his speed to be on display. And you saw it in this game. And listening to him talk after the game, he makes it seem like, the quad is going to be fine. He said a little bit of treatment, a little bit of rest. I should be ready to go for Green Bay. We'll see. The medical staff will be the judge of that. I've heard that from players before, and then their ass didn't play for 2-3 weeks. So we'll see what happens. But it was good to see him get off. And then obviously, you got to talk about the guys that a lot of you guys out there didn't know. I didn't know Chris Odom as well as I did Nate Orchard. I was very familiar with Nate Orchard. I watched tape on him, once upon a time when he was drafted by the Browns some, 3-4 years ago. We all remember him from Hard Knocks. I know some of you don't watch Hard Knocks. Okay, I get that. But for those of you who do watch Hard Knocks every year, he was on Hard Knocks 2 years ago when the Browns were on the Hard Knocks program because he was trying to make the squad because he was on the bubble. They had not been satisfied with what they had gotten out of him as a third-round pick out of Utah, and time was ticking for him, and it was a new regime, or at that point, Hugh Jackson was in his last year, what would be his last year, and Nate Orchard was a guy that was on the bubble. He was on the cusp of being cut, and he ultimately did get cut that season, and the Miami Dolphins had him in their camp last year, and I don't know if he got cut last year, but I know he got cut this year. And the Dolphins had him in their camp. And I thought he was going to make their team, and he didn't. And he's just pretty much been at tryouts on Tuesdays this season and hasn't been on an NFL roster really. And the Redskins are decimated by injuries and looking for someone to come off the streets and give them a little bit of a spark. Signed Nate Orchard, and I saw it. And I didn't mention it because how many times have we talked about a guy getting signed on Tuesday and him not having impact, not even bust a grape? And we get all excited. I did it with Noah Spence. At least Michael Burton has had an impact, but I did it with Michael Burton. I've talked about guys that have been signed throughout. We did it with Malik Jefferson in the preseason, and that didn't amount to anything. So I was like, I'm not going to really do it with Nate Orchard. Even though I was excited when I saw his name and the Redskins signing him, I said, man, Nate Orchard, I've always liked Nate Orchard, man. He's a high energy, high motor guy with some skill. And if you watch him at Utah, you know that this guy is fully capable. He was a elite pass rusher in the Pac-12. And that's why he was drafted in the third round. And I saw some real potential out of him. And for whatever reason, it never really materialized in Cleveland. And here we are in Washington, him getting an opportunity. And he was emotional. I don't know if you guys got to see it. He did the interview after the game with J.P. Finley on CNN, on the Washington program, the Comcast Washington program, whatever the hell the channel's called nowadays. But he did it on the post-game show with JP where JP asked him, what is his emotions like? And he broke down. He's like, man, excuse me if I get emotional, but, when you've been at 10 different tryouts this season, 10 for 10 different teams, he's been at tryouts 10 times and not signed. And he finally gets an opportunity to play. And you think your NFL dream may be over because no one is giving you an opportunity. You get that opportunity and you make the most of it. Yeah, you're going to be pretty damn emotional. And you got to realize, I don't know if he had another job or whatever he had, but this is his dream. This is what he wants to do. And when you play football and you don't have a job, that's your source of income. Because if you watch Hard Knocks, it's not like his wife was working. All right, they got kids at home. It's not like they got other income. They're relying on Nate Orchard to provide for their household, and nothing's really coming in. I mean, it's tough. You're put in a bind. So, he was very emotional, and he had every right to be. I'm happy for him, and I hope that he continues to play well down the stretch, solidifies a spot on this roster, and continues to prove everyone wrong that didn't give him an opportunity to play in this league. As for Chris Odom, I told you yesterday he was from the AAF. He played for the Salt Lake team in the AAF, played well. That's what got him to the NFL. He was on the Redskins practice squad. I didn't think we'd hear anything from him. As a matter of fact, I never thought he would grace the field in a Redskins uniform. I thought he would just be a practice squad guy, and that when we get back some of the guys in the offseason, remember we drafted Jordan Brailford, and you get Kerrigan back, and you get Anderson back, and maybe Orchard is now a part of the mix with Sweat. A guy like Chris Odom wouldn't even see the light of day. Well, he made the most of his opportunity as well. And now you can't ignore these guys. Don't know if Kerrigan's going to play after missing his first game of his NFL career in week 14 versus the Green Bay Packers. Don't know if he's going to be out of concussion protocol or not. But you look at all the opportunities now for some of these guys to play. And even if you get Kerrigan back, even if Ryan Anderson does figure back into the mix after his ejection, you got to give these guys opportunities. I mean, if nothing else, at least Nate Orchard has to get opportunities, because not only was he good in the pass game, he was dominant in the run game as well. And arguably the biggest play of the game wasn't any sacks. It wasn't Fab Moreau's pick that set the Redskins up, even though that was a massive play in the game. It might have been Nate Orchard's tackle for a 1-yard loss of Christian McCaffrey on 2nd and goal from the 2-yard line. Okay. The Panthers run up, try to snap it quick. Redskins get a 1-yard stop from the 1 to the 2. Then on 2nd down, they go with a gun run to McCaffrey, and McCaffrey's going to bounce it outside, and Nate Orchard comes out of nowhere, sheds a blocker, gets to McCaffrey, pulls him down for a 1-yard loss, and makes it 3rd and goal from the 3. If he doesn't do that, McCaffrey's walking into the end zone. And at one point, I thought he was going to walk in, and out of nowhere comes 54, Nate Orchard with the tackle. It might have been the biggest play of the game. So Orchard and Chris Odom both were outstanding, and you tip your caps to those guys, and you hope that they get more opportunities as this season winds to a close. But you look at Kevin O'Connell. I want to talk about what he was able to do in this game, because I know some of you aren't sold on KOC and what he's done. And I told you KOC has pretty much been calling the plays since I'd say the Jets game. I thought he called the plays in the Minnesota game. I don't think he had a lot to do with what we saw on the field against San Francisco, and that was a monsoon, so you kind of throw that one out of the window. And I don't think he really had a lot to say with what was going on versus Buffalo. I thought that was one of those, handcuff, hands behind the back type of play calls because of Dwayne Haskins making his first career NFL start. But after that, I think he's been in charge of the play calling versus the Jets, versus the Lions, and the Panthers. And I think he's really done a good job the last 2 weeks. And I was really impressed with him in Minnesota in that game in which Case Keenum got hurt right before the half. So KOC's impressing me. I mean, you guys always clamor about wanting to run the football, got to stay balanced, run the ball. We're having success, don't stop. Well, that's what they did yesterday. They had some success, and they just continued to pound the Panthers into oblivion. And it wasn't just the same runs over and over again. There was a little bit of diversity in what was being called. They used the fullback. They had plays where there wasn't a fullback. They went off tackle. They had counters. They did a lot of really nice things. They went jumbo. They pulled the receivers in tight. They got creative ways to get to some of the same plays, and it paid off, and they wore on Carolina, and they eventually just beat them up physically, mentally, and emotionally to the point where they just couldn't get a stop. They wanted no parts of the Redskins by the end of that football game on the ground, and that's why they elected to kick the onside kick with 1:51 left, despite having 3 timeouts. They could have kicked it off. And, in that situation, most teams want 2 bites at the apple. If I don't get the onside kick, I got 3 timeouts, I can get a stop. I may have to go the length of the field, but so be it. I'll take that risk. But they also did it for a different reason. They couldn't stop us running the ball, and they knew if they kicked it to us, they were going to give up a first down on the ground, and they were going to lose the football game. So they kicked the onside kick. I thought Kevin O'Connell had a masterful job calling this game. There were actually a couple of screen attempts. Not one to McLaurin that didn't go anywhere. There was another one to Geis that failed because the Panthers sniffed it out. And good job by Haskins of throwing it down at Geis's feet. Or I think he might have even hit a lineman. I think he hit Sheriff in the back. But that's no here nor there. Bottom line is they actually called screenplays, which I like. I thought he did some really good things in getting guys open. Harmon was wide open on the 3rd down where Haskins was able to hit him and he was able to turn up the field. Sprinkle got open, even though a lot of that was Dwayne extending, and then lofting it. But Sprinkle was wide-ass open. I thought he did a good job of setting some things up. Got McLaurin deep on a go ball and that went right through his hands. But that was a great job of setting that up with run, then boom, play action fake, go over the top. So I thought Kevin O'Connell did a masterful job of calling this game. And if it wasn't broken, don't fix it. The run game is working. Keep going to it. He kept feeding, whether it was Geis or Adrian Peterson. All right? Or it was Geis, baby. He kept feeding them the rock. And they kept delivering and bringing home results. And so I thought Kevin O'Connell, for the 2nd week in a row, did some really good things with his play calling. We got to talk about special teams because had we lost this game, special teams would have been at the top of the list of reasons why we did lose this game. You get a kick blocked right before halftime, but probably you were willing to let that one slide. You know what I mean? Like low trajectory, windy day. D-Hop probably trying to get into it, get a low line drive, not allow the wind to take it and do anything with it. So those type of things happen. But, the more disheartening thing was the fact that you'll give up the onside kick. That was Sean Deion Hamilton. I crucified him yesterday during the R3. I'm just going to reiterate this. You got to block the MDM, most dangerous man. Got to block the guy that has the easiest path to the football. So don't go all the way outside and block those guys when the guy coming straight towards the ball has a clear, direct path to it. That's the guy you need to block. So poor job there. And it almost cost the Redskins because like 3-4 plays later, they were at the Redskins 1-yard line. And then the Redskins had to have a goal line stop to preserve the victory. So hell of a job there, but the specials has to be better. Game management, it's just something that this group struggles with. And it goes all the way back to Jay Gruden. Nobody on this staff seems to know how to manage the clock. The second quarter, right before half drive, was just abysmal. After Haskins takes that sack and has the fumble that Louie dives on, I'm watching the clock and I'm in here going nuts. My girl's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "They're just letting the clock." I said he just bitched up on me. He's gonna let this thing bleed down to 4 seconds and kick a field goal on a windy day. But no, he just let like 6 seconds peel off the clock before calling a timeout with 20 seconds left. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? That was a first down fumble there. We got 3 more downs or at least 2 more downs to get closer for a field goal. He just botched that whole process. And because of those seconds, you ended up having to, kick the field goal a little bit sooner, and then you get the sprinkle pass, offensive pass interference. It was just a mess. It was poorly handled. It's what we do, with the clock, and we mangle the clock week after week after week. This group just doesn't know how to do it. But then again, Gruden didn't either. So it's not new news to us. It's just old. It just gets old after a while. But in any event, let's talk about what this win means, though. Because when you look at the Redskins and their 2-game win streak, and I mentioned at the top of this show that every bad team this season has had a 2-game win streak with the exception of Cincinnati, and they just won their first game of the week of the season last week. They may win another one next week. If the trend continues, Atlanta had a 2-game win streak. The Giants had a 2-game win streak. The Jets had a 2-game win streak. The Dolphins had a 2-game win streak. Now we've had a 2-game win streak. So all the bad teams have gotten one. All right, all the bad teams are doing it. Maybe Cincinnati will do it this week and get their second straight win. But what does this win mean now that the Redskins are a 3-win team? Well, because the Dolphins won, the Redskins are still right now in the hunt for the number 1 overall pick because Cincinnati won as well. But forget about all of that. All right, the Redskins are the 3rd overall pick right now. I could care less about that at this point. If they're going to continue to play the way they played on Sunday, I'm all for it. And I want to win, and I'm good with that. And wherever we land, we land. All right, that's always been my perspective of things when the Redskins are competitive. But we haven't been competitive this year up until the last couple of weeks, and so I was cool with going 1-15 because if we're gonna stink, you might as well go ahead and do it all the way to the max. Well, we're still not a great ball club. Let's not get it twisted. And I don't want to hear anybody talking about using the P word. Let's pump the brakes. All right, stop. All right, just 2 weeks ago, we were the laughingstock of the league and destined for 1-15. Now, 2 weeks later, you got people wanting to use the P word. Stop. But I will say this. The only thing that I caution you guys about winning is that with every win, you get closer and closer to a salvageable season, one in which Bruce Allen can say, see, we're close. And I told you, if we would have started to wane earlier, we could have won some games. And so you just don't want to put yourself in a position. And I know how dumb this sounds because there is a decade worth of absolute destruction by Bruce Allen. And so the final 5 or 6 games of the season should not sway Daniel Snyder's decision-making process whatsoever. There's enough of a body of work for him to see that Bruce needs to go. But if this team finds a way to get to 5-11 or 6-10, and Bruce is able to say, see, I told you my guy Callahan was the right man for the job. See, I told you that Haskins was the right man for the job. See, I told you that Kevin O'Connell would make a really good offensive coordinator. See, I told you we could do this. Now you just got to give me a whole season so I can show you what this looks like from start to finish. We could be back here all over again with the same cast of characters. Everything stays intact, including down to Greg Minuski as your defensive coordinator. So be careful what you wish for. If you're asking for this team to go on a win streak and finish this season hot, and you're like, man, this is great, just know that you could also be moonwalking your way right into Bruce Allen being back into the good graces of old Danny Boy. All right? So just make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. If you're totally fine with the whole gang being back, like they were last year, after we all wanted them gone, if you're totally fine with interim head coach Bill Callahan having that title removed and becoming the head coach of this team, if you're totally fine with Greg, I can't get right Minuski being the defensive coordinator yet again next season, if you're fine with the team coming back as status quo and Bruce Allen overseeing it all, then, hey, go right ahead and root till your heart is content, all right? But just know that that is a potential byproduct of this team winning. I'm not going to root against this team, but I'm just telling you, if they win ball games, especially if they go to Green Bay and win, or are just competitive and then finish up the season winning 2 out of the 3 in the division, or all 3 of them for that matter. Nobody in the division is playing well. Right now, the Redskins are the hottest team in the division. As crazy as that sounds. So it's not inconceivable that they could beat the Giants at home, beat the Eagles at home, and then go to Dallas and beat them as well. They may not even need the game by that time. They might have the division wrapped up at 7 and 8 going into the final game of the season. That's how bad this division is. The Cowboys could be 7-8 and have the division wrapped up in week 17. That's how bad this division is. But just know that with each passing win, you get closer to status quo. So just keep that in mind. But I'm still rooting for the fellas And I'm still rooting for these young guys to continue to play well, whether it be in victory or defeat. I just want to see the young guys continue to develop and gain confidence. And I could tell a lot of guys gained confidence after yesterday's performance. I watched them in the locker room. I haven't seen these guys this jovial all season long. It was fun to watch, man. It really was. They shouted after Bill Callahan told them it was Victory Monday. I mean, those are the types of things that I want to see, that I'm excited to see, because they care. And you want them to be able to see that their hard work is paying off. You want them to actually be able to bear the fruits of their labor. And they haven't been able to do that this season very many times. And to see the looks on their face and to hear the excitement in their voice after that win is what you want to see as a fan, especially with a young team in a very difficult season. So with that being said, let's get to in other news quickly. So Bill Callahan stepped to the podium today, day after presser. As you could imagine, he was very excited about the win yesterday. He was also talking about some of the maturation of some of the younger players, Harmon and Geis and Haskins. And he talked about some of the tight end plays. He said, look, the run game performance was really good and the offensive line deserves a ton of credit, but don't forget about the tight ends and the receivers, which is what I mentioned yesterday and reiterated it today, that those guys, you don't have big runs without, Hale Hinch's, getting a kick out block. You don't have a big run without Michael Burton meeting the middle linebacker in the hole and springing Darius Geis or Adrian Peterson. Like, this is a collective effort. When you get big runs, it's a team effort. And so obviously you need special players to make special plays like Geis did with the stiff arm, but you also need to be able to get to the second level first. And in order to get there, you need guys to block up front. And we didn't have the stupid holding penalties, and we didn't have a lot of the dumb things that have set us back in previous weeks. So hats off to those guys. And Callahan kind of spoke to that. He talked about Haskins and, his maturation and him marrying his eyes and his feet. And he said he did a good job of doing that, did some good things getting outside the pocket. The pocket wasn't always the cleanest, but, he did a good job of manipulating the pocket, staring down the gun barrel at times and delivering the football. He talked about Geis's development, says that he thinks this guy could be a really good player for a long time in this league. Doesn't want to compare him to anybody else, but thinks that Darius Geis has a very bright future in front of him, and says, you know what? I think he can be a big-time player in the pass game as well. We haven't really seen that from him. Did have the big screen catch for a touchdown versus the Jets. But outside of that, haven't seen a lot from Geis in the receiving game. But, Callahan seems to think that he could have a role there as well. He talked about the importance of having Chris Thompson on the field. I talked about that yesterday and what a difference he makes. I talked about Adrian Peterson whiffing yesterday. I talked about it again today. And Chris Thompson, you just don't see that from him. When he's in the game, he gets it done 9 times out of 10. And there's a level of comfort knowing that if they're blitzing backside, Chris is going to pick up the guy that he's supposed to pick up. And he's not going to, even though Chris is a diminutive guy, he doesn't get steamrolled in pass pro very often. So it was good to have him back in the lineup. And I thought you could tell he was still a little tentative. I didn't think he did the things that I'm accustomed to seeing him do. Thought there were a lot of yards left out on the field by Chris Thompson in the run game and some of those gun runs. But all in all, I thought it was just good to see Chris back on the field. And, you had Bill Callahan pretty much echoing that as well. He talked about the defensive line and how they were dominant and how the defensive performance after 14-0 looked bleak, but they stayed the course. He talked about Kevin O'Connell staying the course, sticking with the run game, because once you get down 14 like that, it's easy to go away from what you talked about wanting to do during the week leading up to the game. You get down 14-0, you get punched in the mouth like we did early in that ball game, and all that shit you talked about being physical, imposing your will, all that shit could easily go out the window if you're not a believer in what you've been preaching all week long. You get hit in the mouth like that, and things change very quickly. Now all of a sudden you could panic. And Jay Gruden, to Kevin O'Connell's credit, he didn't panic. He stayed with what the game plan was all along. I can tell you, Jay would have panicked. Jay would have went to primarily throwing the football, and we may have dug ourselves an even bigger hole in that game. But instead, and not to knock Jay, but Jay wasn't a guy that wanted to run the ball in the first place. So you give him any kind of reason and he would have gotten away from it. Yesterday was one of those days, easily could have gotten away from us if we would have decided to just strictly go to the passing game, because I didn't think the pass pro was all that great for much of the day. And to Kevin O'Connell's credit, and Bill Callahan said that, he stuck with the run. He stuck with the game plan. Continued to call runs, even though we were down 14-0, even though we were down 14-3. He continued to call running plays, and it proved to be huge for the Redskins in this game, as they were able to scratch and claw their way back and then really take over the game and dominate, and then have to hold on for dear life. Speaking of which, he talked about the special teams and how, Tressway boomed one that, went in the end zone. He's like, this guy is fantastic. We all know that. But apparently the rest of the fans around the league don't seem to know, because he's not leading the vote for the Pro Bowl. We'll get into that when we get to social media maneuvers. But he talked about Tressway, but he also talked about the onside kick. Got to recover that. It's like, hey, we got to be better there with our execution. Almost cost us in this game. So a lot of good nuggets. No injury reports. So we didn't get an update on Morgan Moses. Momo did not finish the game. As you know, Jerron Christian was in. Thought he struggled a little bit in pass pro, but I thought he was actually really good in the run game. And then no update on the injury status of Trey Quinn, nor on Montez Sweat. I guess we'll get a little bit more of that on Wednesday when the team shows up for their first practice of the week. So with that being said, let's get to our social media maneuvers. Got a couple of comments that I want to read from the video that I did yesterday, and I just want to read a couple of them and kind of answer them and go over them a bit. Boom Big says, our best player Tress literally punted it from goal line to goal line, career long. If that's not Pro Bowl material, then he says ... Hey, I get it. Tress has been fantastic. He's been remarkable this season. I thought he was remarkable last season. I thought he should have been in the Pro Bowl last season. This year is even better than last year. There's no way that this guy shouldn't be not only a Pro Bowler, he should be an All-Pro as a punter. You can't tell me that there's been a punter in this league that has been better than Tressway. And I've watched just about everybody around the league, and Tressway to me has been outstanding. And that punt that Boom Biggs was referring to, that was only Tressway's second touchback. Think about that. All the punts we've had, all the 3-and-outs we've had, all the times we've had to kick to the opposition, all the times drives have stalled out right around midfield. And that's only the second touchback he's had all season long, okay? Tressway, no way that this guy shouldn't be recognized as one of the best punters in football with either an All-Pro, I would prefer the All-Pro, to hell with the Pro Bowl, but being a Pro Bowler as well. And right now, Thomas Morstead of the New Orleans Saints is currently your NFC Pro Bowl kicker. So if you guys haven't voted yet, what are you waiting on? Get Tress, in the damn Pro Bowl. And he needs to be recognized for what he's doing this year, because he's the best player on this team and has been all season long. Another comment I wanted to read. Zima B says, tanking doesn't work in football, LOL. So I've talked about this before. I've spoke to this on podcast episodes in the past. I've talked about this when referring to us, that tanking isn't really a thing in the NFL. Why? Because it's impossible to get 53 guys on the same page with one collective goal in mind, which is to lose ball games. Everyone is out for self when it comes to being on a bad football team. I got to put on good tape because my next paycheck may not come from this team. It may come from another team that's watching me on film and saying, hey, this guy can help us. So you can't go out on the field and put bad tape out there. You've got to do your best. So it's almost impossible to tank in football. And then another thing, unlike basketball, which is crazy that basketball tanking is so prevalent, because, even if you're the worst team, you're not guaranteed to have the first pick in the draft, because it's a lottery. They try to, frown upon that by making sure that you're not guaranteed anything by losing the most games in the NBA. But in NFL, coincidentally enough, you actually do get rewarded for being the worst, and you do get the number 1 overall pick. But it's hard to get that pick because you want to win games. Your coaching staff, you can't go 0-16. You can't go 1-15 and expect to survive. Like, that's hard to do. You go 1-15 and the ownership and the GM, they look around and say, do we have the right man for the job? Did this team just quit on him? So it's hard to go 0-16, 1-15 and keep your job. So, coaches, like earlier in the season, everyone was talking about how bad Miami was and, oh my God, they're getting crushed and they're trying to lose games. And the coaching staff looked around and said, if we do this and we continue down this path, we're not going to make it out of this season. We're going to get fired. We're not going to be here to see this thing through. So they said, you know what? If they wanted to tank, they would have just kept Josh Rosen in the game. They said, hell no. Ryan Fitzpatrick gives us the best chance to win. We're going to play him. And look what the Dolphins have done since. Same thing could be said for other teams around the league, and most notably Cincinnati now. They were 0-11. If they wanted the number one pick, they could have just kept the young fella in there, and he would have promptly lost the final 5 games of the season, and they would have went 0-16. But you know what their coaching staff said? Zach Taylor looked around and said, I could be one and done if we go 0-16. It's hard to survive 0-16. So you know what he did? He benched the young fella and brought back in Andy Dalton, and that's why I told you they're going to win. And they did, okay? It's impossible to tank in football because the coaching staff has to be told before the season by upper management, you're okay to lose as many games as you feel necessary to get us the highest draft pick necessary. And no one's ever going to do that because you got to sell tickets. You got to give people reasons to put butts in seats. And if you're losing games, no one wants to come to your stadium. No one wants to support the team. You know how this goes. And if you're losing games, most likely the owner is losing money and no one wants that. And so no one's going to sign off on losing football games. It's just a hard process. So you're right. Tanking doesn't really exist in football. Although you ask fans around the league, we got to tank for this guy and tank for that guy. Tanking doesn't exist. And it never will. It won't in the NFL. It just can't. It's not an environment that breeds tanking because there's too much on the line for too many people. Next comment that I want to read. McAllister Nicholas says, winning is cool and all, but it buys time for Bruce Allen. Great for the young guys, though. I totally get that. I spoke to that a little bit earlier in the show. I totally get it. I'm conflicted by that. I'm not conflicted by the draft pick anymore because I told you, as long as Dwayne Haskins and the young guys were playing and they were playing well, I don't mind winning. I already told you that a while back. But if this were Case Keenum, no, I don't want to win. If this is Colt McCoy, no, I don't want to win. I don't care. There's no development. There's no future in that. But with the young guys and them gaining confidence, I'll go for that. But at the same time, like I said earlier, be careful, okay? Be careful. All right, we could walk ourselves right back into mediocrity right again next season. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. And then finally, the last comment that I want to read is by, let's see, Aaliyah said, 33. We're just gonna say A33. That's what we're gonna call this one. I always want the Skins to win, so this is great. But I regret these downsides. Number 1, Bill Callahan cannot be a head coach anywhere. Do these wins make him look better? Yes, they do. Okay. Number 2, he says Bruce Allen needs a shoe in his rump and kicked out of town to boot ASAP. And 3, Dan Snyder must sell this team to an owner with skill. Don't wins now make it less likely? Well, number 3 was never going to happen. This team could have went 0-16. Dan Snyder was never selling the team. But to your point, 1 and 2 could be realistic possibilities. Callahan could be back, and so could Bruce if this team continues to be competitive down the stretch and wins ball games. So that is your downside to winning. While you're happy and you want to see the young guys flourish and win games, it also has a downside of Bill Callahan could be viewed as a potential long-term replacement as head coach, and Bruce Allen could be given another year to yet dig this franchise even deeper into its misery. And so we've got to also weigh the pros and cons of getting dubs down the stretch of this season. And no, the Redskins are not mathematically eliminated from the postseason, but I'm not willing to have that conversation with you. We're not talking P word on this show. Now, I will say this. If the Cowboys lose on Thursday night to the Chicago Bears and somehow, miraculously, we go and do something that we haven't done in over 2 decades, maybe even 3, because I think the last time, if I'm not mistaken, the Redskins won in Green Bay, Jay Schroeder was the quarterback, which means you're talking probably 87-ish, 86, 87, somewhere in there. So you're talking well over 3 decades ago. Go into Lambeau Field and win. Highly unlikely, but then again, I thought the last 2 weeks were highly unlikely and improbable victories for the Redskins, and they got both of them. So what do I know? Anyway, that's going to do it for your man Louie T here on this edition of the Redskins Nightly News. I thank you guys for joining me. Remember, if you like this video, then like this video, all right? If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Share this video if you haven't already done so, and if at all possible. And also check out the Louie T Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and anywhere you get a podcast, including the website louietnetwork.net. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Remember, we've got skin in the game. Why? Because we're Skins fans for life. Until next time, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys can join me for Rep Your Squad a little bit later on tonight. Also can join me for the recap of the Monday night contest between the Seattle Seahawks and the Minnesota Vikings. But if you don't want to join me for either of those programs, I'll just see you tomorrow here on the Redskins Nightly News. This has been the Redskins Nightly News. You guys, take care. Have a good one. Louie T.